So this session, like I said, is building the talent pool, Indian leaders powering the global landscape. Uh, we have embedded ourselves, GFI India, and globally as GFI, into the ecosystem of alternative protein and smart protein for the past 5 to 7 years, especially for 5 years in India. And we have run many initiatives. The one initiative that we saw earlier was a Smart Protein Project initiative. The one I also briefly mentioned was the India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge, ISPIC, ISPIC. If you Google that, a lot of stuff will come around. For the last 2 years that I ran that initiative at GFI, 1,800 people went through it across 650 universities, agri, biotech, food tech, tier 1, tier 2 universities across India. The kind of opportunities that, for example, a student at NIFTM might be afforded because of the virtue of being near Delhi, being part of MOFP, a biotech or agri-tech student in tier 2 city might not be aware of. So the initiative was India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge, where anybody across India could participate in a 4-month journey globally. That was just one initiative that GFI ran to build the talent pipeline for this sector, right? So that those students, researchers could find career paths in this sector, could take up masters and PhD courses across the globe and in India, so that relevant research, technology development, and across all levels. Like I said earlier, we are building a sector here, right? So it's not just scientific, it's policy, it's marketing, it's IT, it's regulatory. Even if we've like you heard from Devika earlier, Radhika, our policy associate you've heard from, they're both participants of the challenge who then found employment opportunities at GFI, and multiple other such people, Arman, multiple other such examples of people, many companies from Tasting Tour were part of that initiative. So it's obviously showing good outputs and results. But outside of that, we have understood that it's very difficult to formally build this sector because coursework, etc., had been missing for all protein altogether at universities. We've been trying to install some formal coursework at that as well. Companies are still struggling. Like I said, 90% of stakeholders, for-profit stakeholders, entrepreneurs, corporate stakeholders often come to GFI and they're like, who do we hire to make these products? Who's an expert who can work with us and create the next generation of meat, eggs, and dairy? So that has been a big dearth in this sector. So that's what we are trying to solve for here. Because finding right talent is the most important thing for any organization to really succeed in this space. So let's hear from leading academicians and researchers about their joint vision with GFI to actualize and unleash talent, training, and niche placements within the smart protein sector, solidifying our roadmap towards effectively funneling high-caliber talent to the sunrise sector. For this session, I'd like to invite our panelists for this session. First up, I'd like to invite Dr. Vasudevappa from NIFTM as one of our first panelists for the session. So if you would please join us, let's have a big round of applause. We've already heard about Dr. Vasudevappa, so I wouldn't repeat his introduction. Our second panelist for today is Mr. Sunil Marwa from FIXI, who is the CEO of FIXI. Sunil Kumar Marwa is the CEO of the Sector Skill Council, SSC, for food processing. The SSC is supported by the Union Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, the Union Ministry of Food Processing Industries, NSDC, and the leading companies in the food processing sector like ITC, LT Foods, Patanjali, Nestle, MTR Foods, etc. Before joining FIXI in 2018, Mr. Marwa had over 30 years of cross-functional experience, having worked with business groups like Dabur, Ranbaxy, and NIIT. He's from Hindu College Delhi University and holds an MBA from FMS Delhi. Next up, we have Amrita Sadrangani from Gujarat Biotechnology University Project at University of Edinburgh. Please give a round of applause for Amrita as she joins us on the panel. Amrita holds an MSc in Biochemistry from MS University Baroda and is an experienced leader, problem solver, collaborator, and dot connector to solve some of the most important knowledge gaps across countries, with India as the centerpiece of those conversations, including smart proteins. As a veteran with key networks spanning developing business of several companies through market research on life sciences, she has a very strong know-how on how India compares with international education and what we need to teach to be globally competitive. Very warm welcome, Amrita. We also have on this panel today with us Mr. Dr. Gurmeet Singh from Transdisciplinary University in Bangalore. Dr. Gurmeet, please join us on the panel. He's a professor and center head of TDU. Dr. Gurmeet is a scientist, inventor, and innovator. Let's give him a big round of applause. With 25 years of experience in academia, food research, and development, he was part of the senior leadership at Unilever for 20 years. Currently, he's a professor and center head at TDU, where he researches sustainable food solutions for health and wellness problems relevant to society and environment. With GFI, we've been doing multiple programs with TDU because they have an extruder, which is rare in India, HME extruder. And his research spans food analytics, developing functional foods for nutrient deficiencies, texturized vegetable proteins, and creating livelihood-generating technologies for social entrepreneurship. And last but not the least, we have Dr. Madhusudan Rao from CCMB. Dr. Madhusudan Rao, if you would please join us on the panel. Dr. Rao is the CEO of Atal Incubation Center, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology at Hyderabad, AIC CCMB. Dr. Rao holds a PhD in biochemistry from the National Institute of Nutrition, and his extensive career spans protein engineering, cell biology of gene delivery, etc. At CCMB, he's coordinated several multi-institutional projects, including various Indian and international institutes, including Purdue University, Deakin University, Kuamoto University, and the Roswell Park Cancer Institute. Rao holds 12 US patents and is keen on developing processes for technology transfers. CCMB has been the epicenter of a great deal of cultivated meat developments in India. GFI India worked very closely on an application to the Department of Biotechnology, including partnering with the neighboring National Research Center on Meat. The project secured INR 4.6 crore to develop cultivated mutton, which at the time was one of the largest government-given grants for research in cultivated meat anywhere in the world. The project focused on cultivated mutton, and we have buy-ins from industry players from within India to license and commercialize the research as it is ready. I'm sure Dr. Rao will speak more towards it. And last but not the least, I'll invite our moderator for this panel, Dr. Akshay Bhatt from GFI India, who's a science and technology specialist for cultivated meat.
Yeah, thank you, Shardul, so much for the introductions. So I think we can jump directly into questions because we have less than an hour with us, actually. We are over time. But I'll start with the first question to Dr. Rao. So obviously, Shardul mentioned about the 4.6 crore INR cultivated meat mutton project, which JFI India partnered with CCMB as well as NRC Meat. And we got this grant from DBT in 2019. Obviously, a lot of work has been done on that. And my question is like, obviously, this was like a one-time 4.6 crore INR grant, right, Dr. Rao? So Varun, who is now the Good Food Institute India, which is all of us together, how can you actually, fund several multiples of equivalent or higher grant money in terms of the smart protein, let's say, projects, right? And also, in other words, what steps we need to take, for example, to channel more researchers with expertise in areas such as cell and stem biology, genomics, synthetic biology, and let's say we start with CCMB, and how can we actually influence researchers in CCMB, right? So you're a part of AIC CCMB, and what do you think about this? Can you talk towards this now?
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, we were handling a project from DBT on cultured meat, which was a kind of very big initiative at the point of time. But what I can say based on that experience is that the entire idea of cultured meat, I speak primarily on the cultured meat. I'm not into plant-based meat. And what needs to be done is probably it's a very large platform. If you look at the images that GFI developed on various aspects of cultured meat, we need several sub-themes that are required. And it's important to support sub-themes separately, because not at one place, because one place cannot have the wherewithal to do cell culture, media engineering, or scale up, or scaffolds, because a lot of chemical engineers need to come into play. So it should be a kind of a national call on, like, today you see a lot of calls on AMR, for example, antimicrobial resistance, or on tuberculosis, or on something else. It should be something of that nature where, a lot of other stakeholders that get spread over the country, because even though cultured meat is very, it's an imperative, But at the same time, it's not very different from any biologist skill sets. What needs to be done is basically the stakeholders in this particular game, they should be able to convince the young students that it is not something very different. You know, people, anybody who comes out of a good institute had talent in cell biology or molecular biology, all these are required. It's only how do you pivot them towards this kind of approaches is what is crucial in my opinion. So a lot of canvassing and giving better optics or more impactful optics for cultured meat kind of things in universities and things like that is very important, because in my opinion there is no special training that is required if you look at the skill sets. It's only a matter of convincing people this is a very attractive opportunity, both from the, not only, people will be interested if there is an academic challenge, especially students. This meets both. It's not only academic, satisfaction that you get, because, if I say about any of these scaffolds, very, very interesting basic problems. And also at the same time, if you're good at it, you can become an entrepreneur because it's an applied research. So looking at these things, I think we need to present the cultured meat scenario at various colleges, especially by the biotechnology students, in a way that is much more acceptable to them. Today it is not.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rao. I think we should have more, like the Delhi Smart Protein Project, such chapters in other cities such as Hyderabad as well. And I think that's also very important to prime, let's say, researchers in this ecosystem, especially PIs and scientists who actually lead projects to push them to actually start projects in this area.
I agree with that, because as I said, what I said about students also applies to the faculty, because faculty today do not see it as something that's one of the options. And today, if you look at the way government is looking at many of these funding programs, they're always outcome-based. It's now no more, some understanding or solving some fundamental problems is not going to give you good support from the government. So whatever skill sets or experience you have, if you translate it into, an applied work like this, that's where you're going to get some funding. So, in fact, what I said about the bringing more awareness among the students, in fact, it applies more to the faculty. Because if the faculty still wants to, because you can't throw away a faculty from an institute, they'll be there. But how do you make them more inclusive for the national programs like this? You need to bring in more and more, just convince them about the utility of this technology. In my opinion, for example, I can tell you in CCMB I can tell you half the faculty are competent to contribute, but they don't. Not because they can't, there is no imperative. There is no mandation on that. So how do you bring that thing is very important.
Yeah, point well taken, Dr. Rao. I think we should move to the next question. I think you can just pass on the mic to Mrs. Sadrangani. So obviously, Mrs. Sadrangani is one of the directors at the Gujarat Biotechnology University, which is the first biotechnology university in India, and at the helm of GPU, and she's also leading a project at the University of Edinburgh, right? So I think bringing that international touch. So you said that you're going to speak more about what is GPU's vision and how you want to accomplish that at the Gujarat Biotechnology University. Please, over to you.
Thank you, Akshay. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Smart Protein Summit. I recall the first interaction with Varun when the Good Food Institute was much smaller than it is now, and it's really great to see where it is at currently. My background is I'm professional services. I'm not an academic. I worked for the University of Edinburgh for 10 years and transitioned to this project, which is essentially a deep international partnership between the world-leading University of Edinburgh with the Gujarat government and then its sponsored, funded new university called Gujarat Biotechnology University. So Gujarat Biotechnology University has a huge advantage, particularly speaking to your point, Professor Rao, about the remit to do this work that is translation impact driven. So the reason for the government of Gujarat, the Department of Science and Technology, to set up this university was to deliver products and services very simply. and how the University of Edinburgh took that remit and translated it into the project that we have today is sort of 5 lines of service delivery, to put it very simplistically from a project point of view. But to speak, and I'll speak a little bit more about that later, but to really talk to the point of how do we deliver the talent that this sector needs is really centered around the teaching program. So the teaching program we have 5 master's programs, MSc programs at GBU. We started with our first intake this year in August. We've taken a small batch of 27 students. We have a great student-teacher ratio. We've got 22 faculty and more coming in. But the faculty that have come in have been recruited with that remit. Excellent science, excellent teaching, but they're all translation focused. So they've been drawn from a variety of institutions across India and overseas with great and rich experience overseas and in India around R&D and translation. So that is our first major advantage. The mission of the institution is about products and services. The curriculum has been designed by the University of Edinburgh and is being supported in its rollout at GBU by a lot of faculty training formally and informally, so mentoring and support. But it isn't about new content, right? It's about trying to solve the problem that we were given. So we wanted students who would really deliver to the sector, help drive translation. So you recruit MSc students as a company. What are you getting? You're investing 6 months to 1 year in training, and then they're usually gone by the time they're becoming useful. So we want students to be able to go into industry and be able to solve problems. So I say solve problems, not just identify a problem. So the traditional academic teaching is really factual driven, is about identifying problems and then being able to do some research and publish a paper. However, at GBU, there is a lot of fact, but there is a lot of understanding the bird's eye view. So with great thanks to my Edinburgh colleague, Professor Peter Dorner, who's been leading the curriculum development, the way he explained it to me is that a huge amount of factual learning is about the frog's eye view, right, which can see a lot around it. But we want to have that bird's eye view where you have the 3D sort of vision and the ability to be able to solve a problem. And how do we actually practically do that in the classroom is, so we have these short and fat modules. A concept is delivered over 2 weeks in the classroom in the morning. They go into the labs in the afternoon. They do not do set practicals. They do challenge-led practicals. So they are allowed to fail. And they have to learn from the failure that is built into the process. There's a lot of technology we use. So again, one of the discussions earlier this morning about we're very privileged as an institution to have significant funding, instrumentation, equipment, resources, technology. Some of it is still flowing in and being set up. But we hope that once we're settled in at GBU, that we can not only sort of collaborate, but also share some of these best practices with other institutions. I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mrs. Sadrangani. I think that's what is actually required, right? So getting a very problem-based perspective and trying to solve a problem rather than learning things factually, I think that's a very important element. Obviously, you're talking broadly about the biotech sector, but that includes even smart proteins, if not like certain segments of smart proteins as well. And taking such an approach is very important to have quality, let's say, talent moving forward who can take up the next generation challenges, right? Building the future. So thank you so much.
Just to add one quick point, that one of the unique things about GBU, other than all these different things that we've already referenced, is that our biotech focuses across animal, medical, environmental, industrial, and crop biotech. So our faculty and also the areas of marine and bioinformatics, which underpins a lot of these things. So my colleague, Dr. Nitin Trivedi, is here representing marine biotech, and another of our colleagues, with a very strong crop biotech background, already has the seeds of, addressing this area of smart proteins.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mrs. Sadrangani. I think I'll move to Dr. Gurmeet Singh next. So I think Dr. Gurmeet Singh has been a very, very important stakeholder for us. We have especially asked him to come from Bangalore for participating in 3 roundtables and 1 main stage panel session, because his insights are so in-depth and so, let's say, broadly covered that we want him in every other panel, right? So we said, okay, why not Dr. Gurmeet? I think he has this kind of an exposure. This is what his expertise is in. And I mean, on this main stage panel session, I think probably some of the points you might be repeating, but this is for the broader audience here. So you're a plant-based protein expert with obviously all the key experience as well as the infrastructure which is needed, which is placed at the transdisciplinary university. And we know that you have been hosting all these technical training workshops and training programs for students and professionals, right? But also finding the right talent with the necessary skill sets for the plant-based vertical has been a challenge for entrepreneurs, and I think you have been trying to solve that problem through your workshops. But how can we amplify this? Like, how can we take what you're doing at TDU and spread it across various different universities across India as well? Is there a game plan for this, or is it like, okay, we have to do, let's say institution by institution, or is there any model which we can replicate taking out of TDU?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that if we look at the roadmap, right, from skill to developing capability to developing expertise, right, which I spoke about in the previous session. So skill is, do I have the background, right? So I'm a chemical engineer, worked 20 years in industry, 5 years building bioreactors in academia, etc. So yeah, I have the basic skill. To get to a capability level, I require an infrastructure and environment around. I required, the moment I bought a twin screw extruder, a texture analyzer, etc., we had the capability, right? To get to expertise, I needed to run the extruder 1,000 times before I now am touching probably the baseline of expertise. So that's the roadmap that we need, right? I think there's enough, if you're looking at building the talent, right? There is enough skill in the country, right? We have great skill in the country, both faculty level, student level. And what we do need to scale this up is to identify a few centers of excellence, because infrastructure is always very costly and limited, right? And so identify centers of excellence, create the ecosystem of academia, of industry, of government participation around those clusters, and then create enduring programs, seed enduring programs, so that it gives visibility for faculty who are invested in it, that I have a long-term future if I give up other areas and focus on this area. And also to students, right, to say that, hey, this is a hot area. Because frankly, we are all competing. Every single area is competing for talent, right? There is enough talent, as we said. But this is a competition for talent, both from a student and a faculty. Why will a faculty give up a biotech area and move to this area? Or an electronics area and move to this area? Why would a student leave those areas and come to this area? So how do we create very exciting, enduring futures? And one aspect of that, of course, is to do this end-to-end thinking, right? It has to be from consumer need to consumer desired products and services, right? And I say consumer desired because a lot of the thesis and a lot of the works, publication you see is consumer acceptable. I think the age of acceptability is gone, right? It is consumer desirability that we need to focus on, and which requires greater level of insight, right? So I think that's if you root it in consumer need and enduring consumer need, and you understand your consumers, when will a consumer adopt something, the other things will start filling up. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Gurmeet. So obviously you came from a very kind of a business perspective as to what the consumer wants, understand the consumer needs. But my next question is to Mr. Marwa. So obviously you have coded the first ever plant-based food technology job role with us, which has got a bunch of standards, right? And which has got like 510 hours of orientation, I believe, and also hands-on training. So my question is, how are you getting the right set of people to execute this job? Obviously, you're working with TDU as well. And for example, how do you plan to get, let's say, international competitiveness in terms of the job role? Like, for example, how is this person who takes up this job role can be internationally competent to apply for global jobs as well, right? We don't want him to, but yeah, him or her to, yeah. But.
Yeah, today I think everybody wants to be on the global stage. Thank you very much, Dr. Akshay. And It gives me great pleasure to be here, and thank you, Varun and team from GFI. We have worked very closely, and we very successfully developed a course content for plant-based protein technologist. This has been approved by the Regulator for Skills, NCVET, and now we're in the process of putting together a detailed participant handbook, which would be then used as the backbone for the training. There is an appreciation program for about 30 minutes, which is being launched next month, which will be on our LMS, which will give these students of food technology a flavor of what are plant proteins. So this is the work that we have done so far, but I think we have done very little. We may believe that we've done a lot of hard work, but we haven't. The good thing about the PH and the qualification is that it has been validated by the industry. So it is not an academic piece of writing. It's actually vetted by the industry. And when the PH also gets made, we will again put it to the industry to get it validated. So that is the first step to get the talent pool in place. How that will be implemented is that we are in the talking to a number of food tech colleges to take this as an elective course. In the new educational policy and the credit framework which the government has announced, the students have an option to take on industry relevant courses in addition to whatever they are doing. So they can take an elective program in this, and that's how we are going to pitch it. Because of the fact that it is very difficult to get the extruder, wet extruder in every location, we'll be working very closely with TDU, and those students will be doing the practicals in TDU so that they get hands-on experience, and then the assessment certification will be done by FIXI. So this is the ecosystem which we have done. We are also speaking to other bodies where this extruder facility is available. But this is, as I said, part one. The part two which really worries me is the protein isolate training. Because if you are talking of this, India becoming the hub of this particular category, then unless and until there are protein isolates available, unless we put our mind to that, so that's the next job role which I do want to create, but our success as a country on protein isolates is rather limited. So the centers of excellence and the universities which are there, who are working in various agricultural fields and other fields, have tried on isolates. And let me tell you that our dal and our, if you look at the, the chickpeas, very high content of protein, but we've not been able to take it out. So when we are talking of this industry to grow, we are actually looking at it tied down to the American supplies. How long can it happen? A, the cost is very high. B, we are not able to provide the farmer. The whole idea is the millet farmer should benefit. Millets also has high proteins. And we should be able to give something to the society, to the farmer in terms of higher incomes. So these are some of the things which will be addressed in the phase 2. And I think it's a long journey, as the way I put it. The third one is going to be in product development. How do you develop this product? Because developing a product in smart proteins is very tough. I can tell you in food, it's very tough by and large. It's anecdotal to look at how peas transformed. You know, in the opening statement, there was talk of fresh peas and frozen peas. I'll go a step further. Hindustan Lever introduced Hema peas. They were dehydrated peas which were introduced in packets which you had to put in hot water and then cook it. It never got acceptability. The soya milk was struggling for almost 20 years to get over the fishy kind of taste. It never succeeded. So in plant proteins also, we have to really worry about texture, we have to worry about taste, we have to worry about packaging, and we have to worry about nutrition. So there is this whole gamut of, I would call it product development. So this is the third course which we want to make, so that we are able to create an academic environment in which the students can take this up, get knowledgeable, and become an asset to the industry and to the country. So that is the map that we have set in FIXI in this particular category. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an excellent initiative to actually have and go more in depth as to not just that this this job role caters towards, let's say, the technical aspects of it, but also beyond that into product development as well, right? So I think you're bang on target on that. Thank you so much. The next question is for you, Dr. Vasudevapal. We have been having coursework on smart proteins across various global countries. You probably know about this: NTU, NUS, Hebrew University, Ben Gurion University, and much more. Yeah. So obviously we are working with NIFREM to establish a center of excellence on plant-based proteins. It's been on the works, and also probably we should be having training in collaboration with FIXI as well for the plant-based job role and beyond that. But obviously coursework is a very kind of a low-hanging fruit, right? So could you please tell us some of the, not only just at NIFREM, right? So generally what we have seen that there has been a kind of challenge in terms of launching coursework at various universities, and what are some of the steps which we can take at our institution, GFI India, right? So as to expedite this process, and what are some of the ways we need to approach, let's say, institutions to push this forward? If you could please answer that, yeah.
Thank you, Akshay. I think it is really a challenge. I would say that because we are into a new arena of science, which may not be new, which is from time immemorial we have been considering plant as the best source of the protein. But unfortunately or fortunately, India is a carbo-based country where a lot of our energy is derived from carbohydrates. And proteins were there in terms of dal and this, that and all that. Milk, dal, meat, all those things were there, including, of course, the plants. But I would say here, we need to really look at this sector quite seriously. In the sense, now probably the capacity building is one great thing which we need to really look forward. And we need to be very critical and more focused. What should be done really? In fact, I would say here, supposing I want to introduce a course or maybe a few credit hours for the smart protein concept of plants and all that. So how do we bring in it? In fact, I would say, of course, a lot of work is going on in bits and pieces all over the globe. So we need to bring in all these issues and also make into a sort of a curriculum which suits the Indian, I would say, the requirement. That is something which we have to do. Look at, even here itself, we see a lot of variation in terms of the approach. For example, biotechnology or maybe the nanotechnology, and of course the training part of it, and the infrastructure requirement, and how to attract the talent. So these are all the concerns which we really have. So within India itself, there are many institutes working, right from CCMB to CFTRI, and many of CSIR institutes, ICR institutes, and of course the NIFTEMs, two NIFTEMs, one at maybe Kundli and one at Tanjavur. So we should bring in collectively, create a platform, come up with a curriculum which can solely address these issues. Not that on a particular area we are trying to just promote and all that. Let us bring together everything. In fact, as was said by Dr. Marva, probably I know creating a band of products which are acceptable on one side and also good in terms of protein. In fact, we have been talking so much about the fortification of foods also. This fortification, again, doesn't address the issue comprehensively. How do we bring in this change? Because basically India is a protein hunger country. There is a huge amount of protein that is required. Probably that is the reason we have been rated very badly, especially in the international rating, as far as the malnutrition is concerned. So how do we address this? This is something which is very, very important. So now we have good sources of protein, could be the dal, could be soybean and all that, which have a good protein. And protein together with probably the vitamins, minerals and other, I would say the carbohydrates, can form a good comprehensive food. So that is what is the plant-based protein, which I feel is more important than speaking only about the protein. So that's where I think we need to really, GFI can take a lead in this again and probably come up with some sort of a creation of a platform where we can address such of these issues. Why I tell this is, it is just not only the students, even the faculty need to be trained. Because I know the faculty, they are specialized in some small areas, but not comprehensively. So that means a sort of a faculty development program which we have been discussing with Marwaji. And like that, we can always bring in development of skill into this sort of an area, which I would say is very, very important today. In fact, I would even further say, here, the students are to be really motivated. As was said by, I think, Gurumiji, but probably I think, why, after all, he will leave IT and come to the food? Or why somebody else who is specialized in biotechnology will come into this? So these are all things which we need to really look at seriously. And also not that everybody is fascinated only towards those areas of science. This is a very important area. In fact, food will never lose its glamour as long as human being lives on this earth. So that means the food is something which we need to really address and take care. And I wish, in fact, at NIFTM, we are trying to establish a hub for plant protein, smart protein project. And also we have developed a center of excellence for food fortification. These are all the areas of concern which we need to really bring together, work comprehensively, and provide the solutions. As was said by him, it is not what we need to give. It is what is desired that has to come. So how do we do that? In fact, today, we are in the world where earlier convenience food were the common things which were talked. Today, we are looking at the personalized foods or the functional foods and things like that. That means we are trying to give a focus on what is to be done and how it has to be done. Likewise, probably this sort of, the plant protein thing has to be really looked in. And I would say the days are very bright for everyone. And if you are really getting specialized, maybe, of course, I know when it comes to the capacity building and research, we need to be very focused. And with all good infrastructure, which probably I think there are a few things which are essentially required for an institute, that if it can be supplemented and supported, probably the students also get invigorated. All the best.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Vasudevappa. So, my next question following with your explanation is to Mrs. Sadrangani. So actually, what I call as effective curriculum or coursework happens only when there is like hands-on training experience, right? And also like what you said, problem solving. So like introducing coursework is great. Yeah, we are putting coursework, let's say coursework into the curriculum or modules of various universities or colleges across India. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what people look for or what companies look for in a person is basically his technical experience, right? What is gained out of that coursework. So just a question to you as to, at GPU, are you thinking about this? You already mentioned about that, but are you thinking about this differently? Like, you want to take coursework hand in hand with, let's say, hands-on training. In the process of creating such modules in your university or in the process of that, how early should you introduce, let's say, an emerging technology such as smart proteins into let's say, GPU's initiatives or agenda?
Thank you for that question. So as you've heard, the curriculum, I think curriculum are always live. And though Edinburgh has prepared a framework for a 2-year master's degree in these 5 program areas I talked about, but we've already talking about the need to move into a full program, around marine and bioinformatics, which currently sort of underpin some of our other key program areas. However, the conversation about smart proteins is live. Coming here has, further encouraged that conversation. What we are still to develop is our elective programs and options, which come later into the, first program. So smart proteins is definitely a focus. Another conversation that we've been having is that, we've all collectively had conversations and engagement with Good Food Institute for a long time. But it's time to really coalesce that, because we would like to showcase what we are doing at GBU, which we think is very relevant. As I've said earlier, we have this very translational, impact-driven focus, and we want to see how to bring this very different institute to bear on that. The other thing I'd like to say is, delivering research along with teaching is probably one of the most challenging things, and then we're adding impact onto that. And it's not about coming later, it's about doing it right now, right at the start, and really integrating that into how the institution works. And that's not just about faculty or students, it's about an institutional effort to make it work differently, which I would say is my personally, and then everyone else's challenge working at GBU as well. Because we have the ecosystem we have, whether you're a research institute funded by a, central agency, or you're a private institution, or you're a state government institution. When you say this is who you are, there are certain perceptions that come as a standard, right? These are your challenges as a state government institution, or as a private university, or as a research institute. But what we are trying to do is showcase that we can be within a certain ecosystem, but our vision is really taking us somewhere else. It is hugely challenging to be able to move out of some of the challenges that GBU faces in its context. But what we have been given is the permission to have the ambition to go in a completely different way. So we are working to balance research and teaching, which is a huge challenge, of course, for our faculty. It is a huge challenge for our students. We hear complaints about we're exhausted, we've spent such a long day, and I said, I don't mind that complaint, that's great. But what is really energizing is, when I hear them discussing what happened in the lab. I mean, they're energetic and they're excited about it, and they come and say that, oh, all the faculty are so approachable, we can go and talk to them anytime, they'll answer anything. I mean, these are the small wins for us, where we're building an institution with a different culture. And that was the ask from the Gujarat government of the University of Edinburgh, 5 years ago, that we want a different culture, and that's why we're bringing in this international partnership. And of course, the reminder is there every day. We want to see products and services. So that imperative is something that drives us, and I hope that answers that.
Yeah, absolutely, Mrs. Sadrangani. So GBU holds a lot of promise for us, and we look forward to the various initiatives. We do, at least I do follow what happens at GBU on LinkedIn, and very exciting news every 15 days or in a month, so very exciting. So my next question would be to Mr. Maro, but are you feeling okay? Yeah, fine, no worries, no worries. My next question. No, it's okay. I think he's not feeling great. But yeah, obviously in terms of coursework and curriculum, I think we have spoken a lot. And I'd also like to make a few announcements here. We are in the process of signing several MOUs with key institutions across India, and we are working with a bunch of other institutions we are in the process of engaging even more deeply. So in terms of IITs, we are in the process of signing in. We are in the process of almost signing an MOU with IIT Madras Bio-Incubator. We are actively in conversations with IIT Madras, IIT Bombay Bio-Incubation Center, or the Vadhwani Research Center, and we'll be signing an MOU with them soon. Apart from that, we are signing an MOU with the Guwahati Biotech Park, IIT Guwahati, and we are also signing an MOU with the Transdisciplinary University. Dr. Gurmeet Singh is here. It's we have got everything done. It's just the formalities to be completed. And these are some of the institutions. Obviously, CIFE, Central Institute of Fisheries Education, we wanted to sign it on stage today, but because of various logistical difficulties, we couldn't do that on stage, but the formalities are to be complete. So the smart protein sector is actively moving forward, let's say, at the R&D or research and development level. And through these MOUs, what we want to do is basically build that coursework curriculum and integrate that into various universities. Obviously, GBU is one of our priority institutions here. NIFTEM is here. We are actively working, like I said before, to establish a center of excellence at NIFTEM, and a bunch of other center of excellences across tier 1 universities in India. But yeah, I don't have actually any further questions because most of the questions have been answered. You're okay? Sure? Yeah. Okay, so just one last question before we close this session. So this is basically to Mr. Mawa. So, obviously you spoke about skill development and national talent planning and all of those areas, right? So moving forward, you have developed job roles for, let's say, the plant-based segment. So do you think such job roles would be applicable to other verticals of smart proteins, such as fermentation and cultivated meat? Would it fall under FIXI? And actually, also an additional question, what actually inspired you to get into smart proteins in the first place?
I'm so sorry, my apologies for this bad throat. The motivation actually was people have different requirements, vegan diets. Farmers wanted better returns for their crops. And international oriented Indians wanted an option. So these were some of the things which motivated us. We are not looking at any other category right now. So it will be basically plant-based proteins, milk, beverages we're not looking at, but we can look at. And of course, there is this whole range of work to be done on what product to be converted into plant-based proteins. So whether it is a coconut which has to be used, or millet, where you can get the best taste, where you can get best stability, the best texture. That product development work, and that's the qualification which we want to really focus on, because that is the key. And then how anything transforms into something which gives the customer delight, the cooking part of it, the flavoring part of it. And India being a large country, you can't have one product which pleases all. So our next focus would be on the product development in plant-based proteins. And protein isolate training is I don't think we'll ever get into that because that's beyond the scope of our organization. That's more for the scientific community to take up. And lastly, I would like to say about the labels. How to package and label the plant-based protein is very important. And what kind of promises we're making in terms of nutrition. So that's another area of skilling that needs to be addressed, and maybe we will address that, because when we see the products which are now available in the market, it leaves a lot to be desired. Are we actually making claims which are, FSSAI doesn't have any norms as of now for plant-based proteins. So the industry is freely making labels and making claims. So that needs to be set right, and that means people have to be self-regulated. I think the industry needs to be self-regulated rather than FSSAI giving some norms and then everybody is saying, hey, somebody's pressurizing us. So somehow that aspect has also been missed out. So I think for Fixie, it's a long journey, as it is for all of us. So let's see how we get over all these problems. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Marwa. So before we close this session, I just would like to ask our speakers if anyone has any closing thoughts.
Maybe just one closing thought. Maybe it's a little bit of a parallel or digression, but looking at creativity versus innovation, which is where we are with plant proteins, right? And I give the example of, when I used to teach this innovation course, give the example of a potato index of innovation. Potato came to most of the world around the same time, around 500 years ago. Pretty much 99% of the world got a hold of a potato. Today, you give a potato to 1 billion people, we'll have 1 billion different creations in India, right? You give a potato to a Western audience, they'll have maybe 2 creations, a baked potato, a boiled potato, mashed potato, right? Frying is also too difficult for them, right? So they don't typically fry at home. But they created an innovation, McDonald's, by creating French fries, because realizing that people like the taste, but it's not easy to do it, they created a multi-billion-dollar innovation out of it. So we're very high on creativity, right? But what is the problem that we are trying to solve is sometimes not that very clear to us. So we have one-person solutions. We don't have a societal solution. So I think in proteins, we are at that stage. Carbohydrates, pure carbohydrates have been available to us for a long time. Sugar, starch, available to us. Pure oils have been available to us for a long time. Pure proteins are just becoming available, right, to us at an industrial scale. They will soon reach supermarket where everybody will be able to buy 1 kg of powder at a reasonable price. And what all can we do with it, right? Mock meats is just probably one aspect of it. There are going to be many various creations, so we should keep what problem are we going to solve with this? There's a huge amount of opportunity that we'll get. And we need to make sure we can make the jump from creativity to innovation. And one way to do that is to create enough maker labs. There are maker labs available for pretty much for electronics, for mechanics, robotics, etc. The maker labs for food, and it's not just a kitchen. The kitchen is required, but you also need some pilot facilities and all the other, the regulatory, the safety, the specification, the instrumentation. So can we seed these maker labs where recipes can be converted into innovations, right, today. So that's where we would like to get from an education perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Gurmeet. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, I think a good discussion. In fact, just coming back to the maker lab and things like that, probably I think this is the concept on which the National Institute of Food Technology has been developed. In fact, we have all the facilities for development of a recipe, making into a product, piloting and incubating, and also testing facility. That way, I think it's okay, it's good, fine. But how do we really meet the needs of the industry? That's where I think we need to be focused. Why I would say this is, government will not fund for everything. We should understand that there are limitations. Annual, the budget is fixed, and you get only so much of money. Of course, in addition to that, we get some money through projects, this, that, and all, DVT, DST, VIRAG, all these people. But otherwise, the demand-driven research has to be there. So what is that demand-driven research? Probably we need to get into a mode of contract research. I'll tell you, contract research is very simple. The industry can come forward, fund for what they want. And there will be students or the PG students who will be working on that topic. Plus there will be a mentor from the institute or an expert from the field and an industry mentor. I think this is a concept we need to promote so that anything is possible with that. Not that something is just impossible. I would say that here because we started this sort of a concept about 1 year back, 1.5 years. Already we have about 10 or 12 industries lined up, and they are funding, and they are getting the solutions within 8 or 10 months. So we want to go give for a short-term research. Basically, people are not in, industry is not interested to wait for 3 years, which usually we take it for granted. Any research project is for 3 years. No. So that concept, if it can come with all institutions, I would say that is the best day. Probably it is easy to meet whatever we want. Could be a protein isolates or protein hydrolysates, whatever it is. And that is something which is very, very important also. Of course, evaluating the feasibility of these things, efficacy, and the digestibility, assimilability, all these things become very, very important in a system. Otherwise, I think, again, we will be hitting a general target which may hit or which may miss. So that should not be the approach. So probably that keeping in mind, we need to really be more focused. And I would say thanks especially for all the institutional heads here who have been really very, very proactive in terms of participation, in terms of collaboration, in terms of cooperation. I think that should be the motto of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Vasudeva. Anybody else? Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, all the speakers, for taking your time out and coming here today. I think it was a wonderful session, and I think you have definitely energized some of the talent pool, next generation. Few students are here. And thank you once again, and we can close this session.